Good day, I am Zara K. M. Ramirez and I will be reporting accounting for operating lease both from the book of the lessee and from the book of the lessor. So, to fully understand, let us define the operating lease. So, operating lease, the lease that does not transfer substantially all the risks and rewards incidental to ownership of an underlying asset. Ibig sabihin, siya yung kabaligtaran ni finance lease. Dito kay operating lease, there is no transfer of ownership. For example, kapag nagre-renta ka, di ba kapag rent to own, may transfer of ownership. So siya is considered as finance lease. So kapag naman nagre-renta ka at rent lang talaga, siya is considered as an operating lease kasi there is no transfer of ownership. So as a short background, according to paragraph 22 of Pfrs 16, halos lahat daw ng lease on the book of the lessee is considered as finance lease. But we have these two exemptions. So yun yung pag-uusapan natin. Kailan nga ba masasabi na si lease on the book of the lessee is considered as an operating lease? So these two exemptions are namely short-term lease and the low-value lease. So let's discuss both. But first, let's discuss the short-term lease. Short-term lease is defined as the lease that has a term of 12 months or less at the commencement date of the lease. So very self-explanatory naman siya. So kapag sinabi nating short-term lease, from the commencement date, dapat yung lease is have a term lamang of 12 months or less or a year or less. But we have the special note here that a lease that contains a purchase option is not a short-term lease. So kapag daw may purchase option, hindi na siya mako-considered as the short-term lease. So the next is the low-value lease. So the value of the underlying asset must be equal or less than $5,000 and it is based on the value of the asset when it is new regardless of the age of the asset being leased. So, para pala ma-considered ka as low-value lease, kailangan yung value mo nung newly purchase ka, nung bago ka, is less than or equal $5,000. So, let's have an example. For example, nag-purchase ako ng car for $8,000. So, after quite some time, naisipan ko na ipagbenta ko na lang siya. So, pinagbenta ko siya sa halagang $4,000 kasi nga, considered as second hand na siya. So, the question now is, it is considered ba yung car as low value lease? The answer is no. Bakit po? Kasi nga sa low value lease, ang titingnan nating basis ng value niya is when it is new regardless of the age of the asset being leased. If pinagbenta ko siya for $4,000. Yes, it is less than $5,000, but it is not the basis kasi. Ang basis kasi is when it is new. Eh, nung bago siya, nabili ko siya for $8,000, which is greater than $5,000. Kaya ang answer is no. So, parang ang mga pwede lang pumasok dito na example of the low value lease are the personal computers, office furnitures, and equipment that are considered inexpensive when it is new. So next, paano nga ba natin i-recognize yung payment from the book of the lessee in operating lease? So under the operating lease model, the periodic rental is simply as rent expense on the part of the lessee. Bakit po siya rent expense? Kasi po, si lessee, siya po yung nangungupahan. So siya yung magbabayad. So, ibig sabihin, yung payment niya is considered as expense sa kanya. Kaya, ang recognition dito is a rent expense. So, ano naman po yung basis? Pwede siyang straight line basis over the lease term or kaya is other systematic basis. So, gagamitin lang natin si another systematic basis if this is more representative of the pattern of the lessee's benefit. But if it is not, gagamitin natin ay si straight line basis over the lease term. So ano po si straight line basis over the lease term? So sinasabi po ni straight line basis over the lease term, dapat pare-pareho i-recognize na expense every year. So madali lang siya kung talagang walang inflation, walang escalation clause. Pero paano po pag biglang nagkaroon ng inflation, tumaas po si rent expense for the second or for the third year? Paano na po gagamitin si straight line basis over the lease term? So ito yung gagawin natin kapag nagkaroon ng inflation or tumaas si rent expense for the coming years. So for example, for the first year, ang rent mo is 5,000 per month. So per year siya, 60,000 yung babayadan mo for the first year. For the second year, naging 10,000 na siya. So 10,000 times 12 months, 120,000 na yung babayadan mo for the second year. And for the third year, tumaas uli siya. Naging 15,000 per month na siya. So 180,000 na siya sa isang taon or for the third year. So di ba po, iba-iba siya kasi nagkaroon ng inflation. Paano po gagamitin si straight line basis over the lease term? So, ang gagawin natin is to get the sum of the three. So, 60,000 for the first year, 120,000 for the second year, and 180,000 for the third year. So, ang pinakasum niya is 360,000 for 3 years. Tapos, i-divide natin siya kung ilang taon siya babayadan. So, 360,000 divide 3 years is 120,000 every year. So, yung 120,000 po na yun po yung i-record natin pag ginamit natin si straight line basis over the lease term para pare-pareho yung i-recognize natin na rent expense for 3 years kahit na mayroong inflation. So, next is accounting for operating lease. But this time, book of the lessor naman yung pag-uusapan natin. So, sa accounting for operating lease, book of the lessor, meron tayong 6 na pag-uusapan. Paano nga ba siya i-recognize? Ano yung basis ng lease payment niya? Paano siya i-depreciate? Sino magkikarry ng cost for depreciation since there is no transfer of ownership dito? What is the initial direct cost? Paano siya i-recognize? Security deposit and the lease bonus received from the lessee. So, the first one is the recognition. Paano nga ba i-recognize ang payment in operating lease from the book of the lessor? So, i-recognize siya as debit, cash, or receivable kapag hindi form of cash ang ibinayad, and then credit, rental income. So, ang tanong ngayon, bakit po siya ngayon ay naging rental income na? So, kasi po, si lessor, siya yung nagpapaupa. Ibig sabihin, yung payment na papasok sa kanya will be considered as rental income. So, ano nga po yung basis niya? Pwede siyang straight line basis or other systematic basis. So, sabi nga kanina, in lease payment, you can either use the straight line basis or the other systematic basis. So, katulad ng sa book of the lessee, you will use another systematic basis if this is more representative of the pattern in which benefit from the use of the underlying asset is diminished. Pero pag hindi, by default, ang gagamitin natin is straight line basis. So, ano po si straight line basis? So, dapat pare-pareho yung amount na i-recognize natin as rental income. So, kapag meron ulit escalation clause or nagkaroon ng inflation, ang gagawin natin is to get the sum and then divide kung ilang taon siya babayadan. So, para maging pare-pareho pa din yung i-record natin or i-recognize natin as rental income. So, next one is the depreciation. So, sabi nga kanina, in operating lease, there is no transfer of ownership. So, kay lessor pa din yung property na pinapaupahan niya. So, siya pa din yung magkikarry ng mga executory costs like the depreciation of the lease property, the real property taxes, the insurance, and the maintenance. But however, pwedeng ipasa ni lessor kay lessee ang payment for taxes, insurance, and the maintenance since siya naman yung gumagamit noong lease property. So, paano nga ba mag-depreciate for the PPE? So, property, plant, and equipment, paano siya i-depreciate from the book of the lessor? So, pwedeng gamitin si cost model, cost minus accumulated depreciation minus accumulated impairment cost, or kaya ay si revaluation model. Sa investment property naman, ang example nito is land or building, basta ang primary purpose niya is for capital appreciation or para pagkakitaan talaga. But since land, hindi naman siya nagdi-depreciate, so ang i-depreciate lang natin dito is si building. So pwede din siyang i-depreciate from the cost model, cost minus accumulated depreciation minus accumulated impairment loss, or from the fair value model, the right of the use of the asset shall be measured at the fair value. So sabi nga dito, the depreciation policy for depreciable leased asset shall be consistent with the lessor's normal depreciation of the similar asset. So kaya magmamatter talaga kung ano yung model na gagamitin mo. So kapag merong similar asset na na-depreciate ka na, so ang tendency nun, for the similar asset ulit, ganun yung model na gagamitin mo for its depreciation. Next, we have the initial direct cost. So initial direct cost, sila yung cost na directly nating nakakasalimuha when we are executing or kapag pumapasok tayo to a lease contract. So ibig sabihin, kapag hindi tayo pumasok sa lease contract, wala tayong initial direct cost. And initial direct cost is added to the carrying amount of the leased asset and i-recognize natin siya as an expense. Next is security deposit. So security deposit, nagsaserve siya as an assurance to the lessor. Kasi diba kapag nagre-rent tayo, kapag bago pa lang tayo nagre-rent, lagi tayong kinukuhanan ng 2 months deposit, ganon. So parang yun yung nagiging advance natin. So for example, nagkaroon ka ng financial distress, hindi ka makapagbayad ng renta. So, may assurance pa din doon si lessor. So, saan niya kukunin yung assurance niya? So, doon niya yun kukunin sa deposit na ibinayad mo. So, kapag hindi ka makabayad, ang babawasan niya is yung deposit mo. For example naman din, may nasira ka doon na furniture or kaya equipment. So, assured pa din si lessor na mababayadan siya. Saan uli siya kukunin? Doon uli sa dineposit mo. But, if kung wala namang naging ganong aberya, security deposit will be served as liability of the lessor kasi nga bayad na siya at hindi pa naman siya nagagamit and asset of the lessee. So, bakit naman po siya naging asset of the lessee? Kasi yung security deposit is refundable and claimable. Kung ayaw na ni lessee na mangupahan doon and wala namang naging aberya, ayos yung kanyang pagbabayad ng renta, pwede niya yung i-refund. So, kanya pa din yun. So, the last one is the lease bonus received from the lessee. So, it is recognized as unearned income and amortized over the lease term. So, bakit po siya i-recognize as unearned income? Kasi po, siya ay prepayment for the future expenses. Siya yung advance ni lessee. Advance siya from the lessee na binabayad kay lessor, kaya siya ay unearned income. Then, kapag inamortize siya, kasi nga may portion na yung unearned income is magiging income over the years, i-debit natin si unearned income and then credit rental income. So, let's try this illustration from the book, page 780. At the beginning of the current year, Simple Company purchased a machinery for 3 million pesos cash for the purpose of leasing it. So, bumili daw sila machinery for 3 million pesos para parentahan. The machine is expected to have a 10-year life and no residual value. So, debit machinery and then credit cash for the amount of 3 million pesos. Next, on the same date, Simple Company leased the machine to another entity for 3 years at a monthly rental of 80,000 payable at the beginning of every month. So, debit cash and then credit rental income for the amount of 960,000 pesos. Saan po nakuha si 960,000 pesos? So, yung 80,000 times 12 months since we have 12 months in a year. Simple Company received a security deposit of 600,000 to be refundable upon the lease expiration. So, debit cash and then credit liability for rent deposit or pwede rin naman siyang rent deposit na lamang for the amount of 600,000 pesos. In addition to the rental, Simple Company received from the lease a lease bonus of 120,000 pesos. So, di ba sinabi kanina that the lease bonus received from the lessee will be recognized as unearned income. So, debit cash and then credit unearned rental income for 120,000 pesos. Simple company paid initial direct cost of 300,000 pesos. So, debit deferred initial direct costs and credit cash for 300,000 pesos. During the current year, Simple Company paid repair and maintenance of 50,000 pesos. So, debit repair and maintenance and credit cash for 50,000 pesos. The lease bonus is amortized over 3 years or 40,000 annually. So, given naman na 40,000 annually siya. So, ito din yung sinasabi ko kanina na kapag inamortize siya kasi may part ng unearned income na nagiging income over the years, debit unearned rent income and then credit rent income for 40,000 pesos. The machinery is depreciated over 10 years or 300,000 annually. So, debit depreciation and then credit accumulated depreciation for 300,000 each. The initial direct cost is recognized as an expense over the lease term. So, debit amortization of initial direct cost and credit deferred initial direct cost for 100,000 pesos. Saan po nanggaling si 100,000 pesos? Kay 300,000 divide 3 kasi 3 years siya. The balance of the deferred initial direct cost shall be presented as an addition to the carrying amount of the machinery. So, machinery, 3 million pesos siya nung na-purchase minus the accumulated depreciation of 300,000. So, ang carrying amount na lang niya is 2,700,000. So, plus the deferred initial direct cost na 200,000. Saan po nanggaling si 200,000? Doon sa deferred initial direct cost na 300,000 minus the amortization of the current year for 100,000. So, 300,000 minus 100,000 is 200,000 pesos. So, 200,000 pesos as the deferred initial direct cost plus the carrying amount of 2,700,000 pesos, we have the adjusted carrying amount of 2,900,000 pesos. For the computation of the net rent income, we have the annual rent income of 960,000. So, 960,000 per year to, plus the lease bonus of 40,000 pesos. We have the total rent income of 1 million pesos, minus the depreciation of 300,000 pesos, minus the repair and maintenance for 50,000 pesos, and minus the amortization of the initial direct cost of 100,000 pesos. So, we have the net rental income of 550,000 pesos. So, as a sort of review sa aking diniscuss, so we have discussed the accounting for operating lease both from the book of the lessee and from the book of the lessor. So, paano nga ba uli natin malalaman that the lease on the book of the lessee is considered as operating lease? So, we have two, the short-term lease and low-value lease. Short-term lease, that the term of the lease should have the term of 12 months or less from the commencement date of the lease. And low-value lease naman, the value of the underlying asset should be equal or less than $5,000 when it is new. So, considered as inexpensive siya when it is new. So, paano i-recognize si lease on the part of the lessee on the operating lease? I-recognize siya as a rent expense. Bakit ulit rent expense? Kasi si lessee siya yung nangungupahan and yung ibabayad niya is considered as an expense. So, ang basis niya is straight line basis over the lease term or other systematic basis. Next, we have the accounting for operating lease from the book of the lessor. So, we have the recognition. Paano nga ba siya i-recognize? I-recognize si lease on the book of the lessor as rental income. Bakit po rental income? Kasi si lessor, siya yung nagpapaupa and yung ibabayad sa kanya is considered as rental income. Ano po yung basis niya? Pwede siyang straight line basis or other systematic basis. Paano uli si straight line basis kapag nagkaroon ng escalation clause or nagkaroon ng inflation? So, ikukunin nyo kanilang sum and then i-divide kung ilang years sila. So, paano naman si depreciation? So, si depreciation is makikarry ang cost ni lessor kasi nga there's no transfer of ownership. So, kapag property, plant, and equipment, gagamitin natin si cost model or revaluation model. Kapag naman investment property, gagamitin natin si cost model or the fair value model. Si initial direct cost naman is considered as an expense and it should be added to the carrying amount of the leased asset. Si security deposit, kapag wala naging aberya si lessee, is considered as an asset on the part of the lessee because it is refundable and claimable, and liability naman siya on the part of the lessor. And the last one is the lease bonus received from the lessee, which is considered as unearned income because siya yung advances ni lessee and amortize over the lease term. Bakit nga ba siya ina-amortize? Kasi may portion na nagiging rent income siya over the years. So, debit unearned income and then credit rental income. So, that's the end of my report. Thank you!
Good day everyone. To continue, I'll be discussing accounting for sales and leaseback. So, a sale and leaseback is an arrangement whereby one party sells a property to another party. So, ito po yung first part ng definition pertaining to sales transaction. So, is an arrangement. So, meaning merong pinagkasunduan between sa dalawang party. So, yung isang party nagbenta ng property. So, siya yung seller. Syempre, kapartner ng seller ay buyer. So, at may property or yung asset na involved. And for the second part of the definition, then immediately leases the property back from its new owner. So, dito, itong definition naman na to ay for the leaseback transaction. So, matapos ibenta, nilis din ni seller yung asset at dahil dito, ang tawag na sa kanya ay lessee. As for buyer, siya yung new owner. Ang tawag naman sa kanya ay lessor. So, sa sales and leaseback transaction, merong dalawang party na involved, seller lessee and buyer lessor. So, para naman dun sa property or yung asset na involved, dito walang physical transfer na nangyari o hindi dineliver yung asset kahit na ibinenta na nga yung ng seller yung asset dun sa buyer. Makikita natin dito sa illustration ng sales and leaseback transaction yung property which is yung machine na pagmamay-ari ni seller, binenta niya kay buyer, nakatanggap siya ng 100,000 and upon entering sales and leaseback transaction, as for the machine, dahil nga ni-leaseback, na kay seller lessee pa rin yung property, pero binabayaran niya ng periodic payments si buyer na siya na nga ring lessor. For this one, ano-ano nga ba yung mga rason kung bakit pumapasok o pumapayag yung magkaparehong party, seller lessee and buyer lessor sa ganitong transaction? Una muna ay sa point of view ni seller lessee. So, dito, halimbawa, nakakaranas si seller lessee ng financial problem at kailangan niya ng agarang mapagkukunan ng pera. Pwede siya magbenta ng asset na pagmamay-ari niya, syempre. And para ma-retain yung right to use the asset, papasok din siya sa leaseback transaction. Dito, natanggap agad siya ng pera na from the buyer through sales transaction at na-retain niya yung right to use the asset dahil nga sa lease transaction. So, basically, nagkaroon siya ng pera from sales transaction. Pwede niyang magamit sa iba pang part ng business. At yung isa pang asset, yung na ibinenta niya nga, na nirerentahan niya na ngayon, ay nagagamit niya pa rin sa yung usual purpose ng asset. Para naman sa point of view ni buyer lessor, dito hindi naman niya talaga kailangan yung asset na yon. Sabihin natin na may extra siyang amount, so binili niya nga yung asset, at yung pinaka rason ay yung cash inflow from this transaction. Kasi nga 'di ba ginagamit ni seller or na nirerentahan niya yung asset, so makakatanggap si buyer lessor ng rent income, at na kung tutusin ay pambawi niya lang din naman dun sa pinambayad niya dun sa equipment. Pero may karagdagan pa dito, yun yung interest na napagkasunduan sa sale and leaseback transaction. Next is pro forma journal entries. Dito muna tayo sa part ni buyer lessor. Makikita natin dito yung different scenarios. First, fair value is equal to the selling price, at yung fair value is higher or lower than the selling price. So, definition muna tayo. Ano muna yung selling price ay yun yung napagkasunduan ng dalawang party na kung magkano ibebenta, sa part naman iba kung magkano bibilhin yung asset. For the fair value, yun yung totoong value ng asset, at meron din dito yung carrying amount na sa book value naman ng asset, na sa part naman na yun ng seller lessee. At dito sa sale transaction, sa part ng buyer, merong acquisition of asset. So, yung record na value ng asset na yun ay yung selling price under the normal scenario, yung equal yung fair value sa selling price. At dahil nga sa pag-acquire ng asset, nagkaroon na dito sa example equipment, so i-debit yon, and nagbayad ng cash dun sa seller, so i-credit yung cash. Ito na yung sa sale transaction under the normal scenario. So paano naman kung magkaiba yung amount, yung fair value ay higher sa selling price, or fair value is lower than the selling price? So doon muna tayo sa una, fair value is higher than the selling price. So dito meron tayong tinatawag na advance rental. Dito nagbayad agad yung seller lessee for advance rent dun sa buyer lessor. For the another scenario, fair value is lower than the selling price. Dito naman ay may additional financing. Merong additional transaction, kaya makikita natin sa journal entry, merong isa pang account na financial asset. Halimbawa nito ay nag-acquire ng equipment, then at ang yung selling price nito ay 120,000, at yung fair value naman ay 100,000. So 20,000 ay mapupunta sa financial asset. And for these two scenarios, kung mapapansin natin, i-record na amount ng asset ay kung ano yung mas mababa. For fair value is higher than the selling price, ang value ng asset ay yung selling price. For the fair value is lower than the selling price, ang value naman ng asset ay yung fair value. So that's all for the sale transaction. Doon naman tayo sa part ni lessor na leaseback transaction. For the leaseback transaction, dito na ngayon sa lessor part. At kanina, previously discussed, meron yung dalawang accounting, finance lease and operating lease. So, ano nga ba yung mga criteria for finance lease? So, una yung transfer of ownership at the end of the lease term. Pangalawa ay option to purchase the lease asset. Pangatlo ay yung kung material ba yung asset, yung lease term. May at least 75% of the useful life of the asset. At lastly, kung substantial ba yung present value of minimum lease payments or at least 90% dapat yung present value as compared to the fair value. As for operating lease, kung wala naman yung may isa sa apat na yun, then operating lease. So, dito muna tayo sa operating lease for the leaseback transaction. Sa side ni lessor. Under the operating lease, dahil yung lessor yung may-ari ng asset at pinaparentahan niya yung lease asset, then ito yung entry. Debit cash and credit rent income. So, to record the first rental payment. Sunod naman ay yung dahil nga sa kanya yung asset at nag-depreciate yun, meron ding entry for this, debit depreciation expense, credit accumulated depreciation. Kanina may nabanggit ako na iba't ibang scenario, di ba? So, dito naman, if the fair value is higher than the selling price, ganun pa din naman yung mga entries, parehas lang. At kahit, di ba may nabanggit ako na advance rental. So, hindi pa naman to importante sa part ni buyer lessor. Mas mabibigyan pansin to sa books of the seller lessee. Dito naman yung may pinagkaiba na if the fair value is less than the selling price. So, nandun pa rin yung dalawang entry, yung sa rent income and depreciation. Pero may isa pang entry for additional financing. Makikita nyo nga dito, debit cash and credit for financial asset and interest income. So, merong financial asset or additional financing from the point of view of the lessor na paglipas ng panahon ay kanyang kokolektahin din. For lease transaction under the finance lease, kung mapapansin nyo dito sa unang entry, makikita nyo dito yung direct finance lease. Dito naman sa finance lease, kapareho lang siya nung na-discuss kanina na kung paano yung sa finance lease. And kanina, for operating lease, hindi na nag-recognize ng asset, direkta na agad sa collection. Pero dito nga, sa finance lease, kung makikita nyo, i-credit pa rin yung equipment. At yung lease receivable naman ay yung buong amount or gross amount ng rental payments. And under the finance lease, hindi na kailangan mag-depreciate. Mag-amortize na lang ng income. So, kung makikita nyo dito, nabawasan yung or na-receive na yung lease. So, credit lease receivable. Then yun nga, yung cash na na-receive, i-debit. So, for to record earned interest, so debit unearned interest income and credit interest income. So again, yung may iba't ibang scenario nga na nabanggit kanina. So dito, if the fair value is higher than the selling price, ganun din naman, parehas lang yung entries. Ganun din sa if fair value is less than the selling price, ganun din yung entry. for yung mga naunang entries from at katulad din sa operating lease may karagdagang entry na for additional financing. Debit cash, credit financial asset, and credit interest income. So for this one, the pro forma journal entries sa side naman ni seller lessee. Kung kanina ay sa kay buyer lessor, dito naman ay books of the seller lessee and under the finance lease. So ulit, dun muna tayo sa unang part which is the sale transaction. So dito makikita natin sa journal entry na nakadebit ang cash na yun yung consideration received sa sales transaction. At saan galing yung cash? Doon naman yung galing sa binentang asset. So dahil binenta na nga yung asset, naka-credit na yung equipment na ang value naman nito or yung amount ay equal sa carrying amount. So again, nasa seller lessee side na tayo. So yung carrying amount ay yun yung recorded, yun yung book value ng asset. At again yung fair value yun yung totoong value ng asset. So dito kung merong depreciation, debit, accumulated depreciation kasi nga binebenta na yung asset. So lastly, merong isa pang account, maaaring sa dalawa na to, loss or yung isa yung gain on sale and leaseback. So for this one, nakasalalay naman yan dun sa selling price and carrying amount. So kung mas mataas yung selling price sa carrying amount, then that's a gain on sale and leaseback. Kasi nga yung kung mas naibenta mo pa ng mas mataas yung asset kumpara sa carrying amount, then that's a gain. So otherwise, it's a loss on sale and leaseback kung mas mataas yung carrying amount kaysa sa naibenta mo or yung selling price. So that's for the sale transaction. So doon naman tayo sa pang part ng sales and leaseback transaction. For the leaseback transaction, dito naman sa this transaction, ang i-apply lang din dito yung katulad nung sa kanina, accounting for lease na so may pro forma journal entry na nga dito. Debit, right of use asset, credit, this liability. And yung gain or yung loss on sale and leaseback nakadepende ngayon sa selling price and carrying amount. So dito naman po sa lease transaction, leaseback ni seller lessee yung asset. So meron pa rin siyang right to use the asset at ito yung part na hindi transfer or ito yung na-retain sa kanya, yung nirerentahan niya. So yun yung naka-debit right of use asset. At kung madalas kung ano man yung lease liability ay siya na ring amount ng right of use asset. At yung value ng lease liability ay present value ng rental payment. Pero dahil nga ay ito yung book of seller lessee, alam niya yung carrying amount ng asset. So doon na lang ibabase yung right of use asset. Bilang source of valuation. So sa carrying amount na kukunin yung value ng right of use asset at hindi na sa lease liability. So meron tayo diyang computation. Again, yung kapag mas mataas yung selling price sa carrying amount, then that's gain on sale. And if the selling price is lower than the carrying amount, then that's loss. So nandito na po yung computation. For the lease liability, equal lang siya sa present value ng rental payment. For right of use asset, present value of rental payment or yung lease liability over fair fair value multiplied to carrying amount. So bakit po present value ng rental payment yung numerator? Kasi yung ang hinahanap natin dito ay yung hindi transfer or yung binabayadan. So yun yung kukunin, kaya ito yung numerator. So ang base ay carrying amount kasi yun yung pinagbabasihan ng right of use asset. So fair value as denominator or yung totoong value ng asset. Dito naman sa gain or dun sa loss on sale and leaseback, nakadepende nga yun sa selling price and carrying amount. Makikita natin na naka-debit or credit yung gain or yung loss kasi nga binabawasan na natin yung gain or yung loss on sale and leaseback sa lease transaction, o inaalis na natin yung asset na na-retain or yung hindi dapat gain on sale and leaseback kasi nga nagagamit pa rin yung asset or yun yung right of use asset. To get the value of gain or loss on sale and leaseback, ito naman yung formula at halos katulad lang din siya ng sa right of use asset, naiiba lang yung base amount. So bakit yung total gain on sale and leaseback or total loss on sale and leaseback, ito yung base at ito yung amount dun sa sale transaction. So paano naman kung hindi equal yung fair value sa selling price? So dito wala namang masyadong mababago bukod lang dun sa numerator part sa formula. And for this liability, ganun pa rin naman kasi ang tinitingnan naman dun ay yung selling price at hindi yung fair value. For if the selling price is higher than the fair value, meron nga ulit tayo ditong additional financing na kasi nga ay hindi additional financing siya at hindi siya part ng lease or nung right of use asset. Kailangan siyang i-minus dun sa present value of rental payment. Kasi nga magkaibang asset sila or hiwalay na asset yung additional financing. If selling price is lower than the fair value or dun nga sa advance rental, dito naman i-add na siya dun sa present value of the rental payments. Kasi nga part siya ng lease, advance payment lang. And to continue, katulad lang dun sa mga nauna or katulad lang ng dati sa lessee side, kailangan lang i-amortize yung lease liability at yung right of use asset ay kailangan namang i-depreciate kasi nga na-compute na yung value dun sa sale and leaseback transaction. So dito, to record the first rental payment, so side to ng seller lessee, so i-debit yung lease liability and interest income, then credit cash to record the depreciation of his asset or yung right of his asset nga. Depreciation expense, debit, then credit accumulated depreciation. So ito naman ay yung sa deferred gain. Deferred gain on sale and leaseback, debit, then credit gain on sale and leaseback. Lastly, dito naman madali lang. Under operating list of books of the seller lessee, syempre merong sale transaction. So to record debit cash and credit equipment. So yun yung loss or yung gain on sale and leaseback, nakadepende na dun sa selling price and carrying amount. So dahil operating listed, hindi na kailangan yung right of use asset or yung lease liability, at nagbabayad na lang ng rent. So, yung entry dyan ay yung debit, rent expense, and credit cash. At wala na ring depreciation kasi nga hindi naman or wala ding record na kahit anong asset. At ganito lang naman yung sa seller lessee side under the operating lease. And that's all for accounting for sales and leaseback transaction.